we just need to follow the process.
Mhm.
And, once, we in relationship, within, our team, like, and within the team of other groups, like I always believe that, that the trust, going back to the topic of trust, when we
Right.
have the trust, we can accomplish anything. We can figure it out, like, how to like tackle the biggest problems in the world, including like, oil spill that you mentioned that in one time had like a fund 420,000 like, task lines, to be done, like in a project, 420,000.
Let me ask you this. Let's go back to the element of trust. I mean, look, you've utilized trust not just in regards to your professional career and the longevity of that career, but also in regards to the book that you have pulled together, Trust 360. And so, one of the things that I'm curious about is the ability, it's not just as we just touched on, having understanding that people can do it and telling them they can do it. What would you say are some of the steps that could be scaled upward or downward in regard younger or older in regards to ways that you can encourage or have people trust the process, so to speak?
Welcome to the Your Message Received podcast. And now, taking your message to the finish line, your host, John Duffin.
Hey folks, John Duffin here with Duffin Media. Welcome back to another episode of Your Message Received. Your Message Received is the home, the place, the platform to help you find your most true, authentic business voice. Heck, maybe it's just your most true, authentic voice. Get what you want, find what you need, improve your results, conquer the fears that are around you in regards to communication for business. And we're always grateful that you keep coming back. Today, we've got a winner. I've got someone with me today that has international background, master black belt background, which I don't, so I'm duly impressed. Significant corporate background, and we're going to talk about a lot of different topics as it relates to culture, AI, how it impacts the younger workforce, and the ways that we can merge or ideas of utilizing strengths, whether it's in military, whether it's in corporate. And so, why not bring an expert here at this point who can teach me? Ivan Radovic, it is really nice to have you here, sir. Welcome.
Thank you, John. Thank you for having me on the show.
It is my pleasure. So, folks, Ivan is the president, CEO of Novaces, which happens to be also and 25 years plus in leading transformation initiatives across military healthcare, disaster recovery, federal agencies, and major global companies. As I said, seriously impressed in regards to the specifics here. Not only that, Ivan is a published author. The book, Trust 360, we will certainly touch on today as well, too. And I'm just glad you're here. So thank you.
Thank you.
Ivan, you were in Yugoslavia. What got you to the United States?
Oh, like I came back in like early 90s.
Yeah.
And what brought me in, it's there was a war that started there, where people, just didn't trust each other, and they just got like, in a conflict, and it was a lot of time, a lot of conflicts, like we hear, even, in this day and age, like,
Sure.
they come, because a lot of time people blame conflicts on religion, on this disagreements.
Mm-hmm.
But the real source, of all the conflicts, is that people don't trust each other.
Mm.
And and one of the reasons, like, it's kind of an intro of my book, is one of my good friends, and another, entrepreneur, like very successful woman, like asked me, hey, how can somebody coming from Eastern Europe, talk about trust? And I was like, well, it's a real reason, I need to talk about trust because I grew up, where nobody trusts anybody,
Yeah.
kind of in the early 90s, they, when the breakup of former Yugoslavia was all about like nobody trusted anybody. So guess what? We're going to go to war, to solve the problems, wars never solve the problems, they just amplify them. So hence, that's the reason, I came to United States, to start, new life and to harness some of the great things, about United States.
I love you just I don't love, I can't get over when you just said something really powerful to me, where you said, someone saying to you, "You're from Eastern Europe, how could we trust you?" As if you were carrying the message of the Eastern European regime personally to the United States. It's I wonder, when I hear something like that, the burden that, like, in terms of perception, that someone would literally say in the United States, "Hey, I don't know how I could trust you based upon that." How were you able early on, building a business, to establish trust at this point so that others would be like, wait a minute, this person has a lot to say and I need to hear it?
John, the biggest thing in my career was a challenge.
Mhm.
So I like to be challenged. Sometimes I was just in a business dinner last night, and we talked. I had people from quite a few backgrounds, and and we're just got a little bit into the topic, how we
Right.
can all trust each other, and how we that. And I always love challenges, and kind of the more you doubt me, the more you beat me, the more I want to prove it wrong, and prove it the other way. And this was kind of just asking, well, you come from the region, where there is very little trust, how can somebody trust you, or how can you even talk about trust, and that's exactly the reason I wanted to prove, that's not correct. We all people, the way, we are formed as a DNA, our DNA, we all are humans, and
Mhm.
we can all act the way, to be, you know trustworthy, and and organize ourselves, that when we develop the relationships with the people, and this is in business, in diplomacy, in friendships, you name it, without establishing the trust level, we don't actually create, and what I kind of learned, the creativity in trying to build something meaningful, bigger, whether we are building trying to build a business, or we are trying to form good diplomatic relationship between two countries, between two companies, between two friends, between two families. It's all kind of boils down to, establish, in a way that we can trust. I can tell you, hey, if I'm going to do something for you, I mean, I will do it, and be very honest about it. Uh, this is goes back, from one culture to another. One
Mhm.
culture, maybe, or, very friendly in a way that they tells you, we're going to do something for you. And they're always talking about it. But then when you go down, it's just a surface, and when you go down, it does not really happen. The other ones, more on the other way, well, we are not going to do it, but they may come forward and actually do something good for you. So there are these nuances, these differences
Mhm.
that we go across the globe, that people have to, understand, you can't generalize anybody. And, that's why I was kind of even, from region that I came from, yes, traditionally, you heard about, mistrust, but it doesn't mean like, that everybody is like, person that you should trust,
Exactly.
it speaks, it's really how you establish yourself, and how you build, your relationships, in your life, are people going to come back to you? Are people going to say, hey, I want to talk to John, I want to
Yeah.
talk to Ivan because because I feel good, like, and I feel like, they're not going to let me down, like if they told me, hey, I'm going to get back to you tomorrow, with the answer, you'll get back tomorrow, with the answer. You're not going to just disappear.
Well, that's it's responsibility, accountability, and I want to continue that topic. Before we do, I also want to address something that is I have a nephew that lives in New Orleans, and I had done a lot of business in my field of television advertising for a lot of years in New Orleans. You were there a while back, had set up a consulting firm, and had to endure the effects of Hurricane Katrina. Um, it may be old news in the sense of for those that have, that read the news or watch the news, and I get that. So I'm not looking to go back and revisit history, but I do want to ask you about that. In the rebuild to you, because we could all see how horrific it was. I just had a question which had to do more with once the cameras left and it wasn't the big story on CNN or NBC or whatever, how were you able to endure, to find the resilience to build or rebuild for you?
Those were very, I'm going to say like, very difficult times
Right.
For anybody, that had to live, through, disaster of that magnitude.
Yeah.
And we're not talking about like, rebuilding a business, talking about like rebuilding lives, where people have completely, lost their homes, lost their livelihoods, things has completely changed, over like 24 hours. You wouldn't imagine. I remember, from our perspective, we were like very locally focused, at that time, like, in business, and all our clients, just, facilities were devastated overnight, or or one was devastated out of, people were like misplaced, so we went to zero business, like, in overnight. And we were like, where do we go from here? But I always have a saying, like, in every adversity, there is a seed of equal or greater opportunity. And this is, message, that, I talk to young people a lot, it's like,
Sure.
because, I know it is one of the topic, that I'm also covering in a book, it's in new generations. I talk to them a lot, because about how they deal with adversity, because a lot of parents these days, unfortunately, they don't want to allow people to live adversities, so kind of trying to steer away generation from adversity, but we learn a lot from adversities. So going in, so say, hey, never, every time something bad happens to you or bad happens around you, it's a great lesson. We celebrate it as much as like, successes, because we have to learn. And only way to learn, is like navigate, adversities, So going back, like, to Hurricane Katrina, I was much younger individual, like before I didn't have like, gray hair at that time, like, like
you don't have that much gray hair, but all right, fine.
almost 30 years, like
wow,
after
yeah,
that,
sure.
but during during the time, like, I was like, okay, this thing happened. So what do we do next? We got to roll our sleeves and work even harder,
Right.
To find a way out of it. We're not gonna stop here. So we're gonna get out. We're gonna get out of town to find a business. And we did get out of town, and and got out of a comfort level. search the nation and build the business, in other places. And then, eventually, we were still in New Orleans, but we were doing stuff around the nation, and that was,
Right.
it was a wake up call. But but kind of for anybody, that ever had to deal, and this is gonna, and I'm kind of letting the letting cat out of hat,
What? All right, go ahead.
yeah, whatever right now that it's my topic of the next book, one that I'm currently writing about, like how we make those decisions, how do we persevere out of the stuff where we are stuck behind a place, where I can't get anything. Okay, we're in Katrina, everything was devastated. There was no business, so I can be banging on that door, forever, but nothing new is going to appear for a long time. So this is where, like, every individual, whether this is individual issue, whether it's a business issue, you have to kind of look around, and you can't be staring at that same place that you were comfortable. So not being comfortable, it's like, it's comes to your advantage. It allows you, to see things that you haven't seen before. Because guess what? There's, if you're looking in one direction, we have that always the same door that we are familiar. But guess what? If you turn our heads around, like, there's so many other opportunities. There's so many other doors, it's not just, within your community, it could be within your state, within your country, within the world, So I think everybody needs to be open, and everybody has to be, have that ability, to turn around and look at all these other doors that you can open.
Ivan, I ask often on the show, and I'll ask you the same question as well, too, which is this. When was the first time, and let's use that as a template, you've got to rebuild, you got to open new doors, as you say. Even though you're based in New Orleans, you are now working nationally, so to speak, with helping companies and service members. I want to ask you, when was the first time you realized that you could open a new door that worked? I mean, do you remember an early time in that shift where you had to open a different door? And could you describe how it worked for you? When you knew, oh, this is interesting, I can take this. I took this risk and it paid off.
I would say there's a, coming to United States, was one of those doors that I took a risk, and opened, because it got me out of comfort zone. But I'll go from, just after the, Hurricane Katrina, it's like, when was the first time I realized? The first time I realized, when the city was flooded, and you saw all these doors, they were open before. They were just closed, they were wiped out. At that time I realized, you have to go someplace else. You gotta find, in one of those other doors, they're available, and we start calling people, that we knew, and guess what? There's other doors, that open at that time and allow us, to find another direction that led us, to other places, around the country.
I love that. So, I mean, look, I was going to ask for a specific example, not even necessarily a case study. You've got clients on the level of BP, ExxonMobil, ConocoPhillips, Lockheed Martin, companies that everyone would know. When was the first time for you, or an early time, doesn't need to be the first time, but an early time when you penetrated and you were able to demonstrate that, not only could you walk in a different door, but you could drive results, whether it was through Novaces or through your own experience, to help someone build and establish trust?
I'll go back, earlier in my career, that's when before I established a business, where I was actually in a graduate school, and I was inside, in one of the, university buildings, It was a engineering building, of university I was attending at the time was actually happened to be University of New Orleans,
Mm-hmm.
and there is like this tall gentleman, like walks in a hallway,
Mm-hmm.
and I see him like talking to a bunch of professors, and he walks to me and say, hey, like I just heard like you're one of the grad students here, like I have a project that I'm looking for somebody to help with, and I'm looking like, who this guy to look like some executive, like from some big company, like
Right.
be looking for some guy that's like still haven't like him and established or haven't done anything significant in life to actually be contacted. But he said like, yeah, I mean, I'm looking for a young individual to work with me on this consulting project that I need outside help. And I was like, well, that actually makes it like even more interesting, because how would you get me? I'm not the one that has experience, like hasn't worked anywhere. But he said, like, don't you worry, young man. Like, I'll work with you. And guess what? That was my door into like in a world of consulting.
Mm-hmm.
I've learned that I can do it.
Mm.
I was invited, I was brought in like, to various large, production facilities, like, where I was working with all the managers of like big production projects. This was in oil refineries. Oil refineries
Right.
are like big kitchens. Like
Yep.
you go there, like a lot of things is cooking in like in this big, like tanks. And with the high heats. And all of that. But I was invited, and I learned very quick, and that was my door. That was the door that just opened for me. Like but I could have I could have say, hey, like I don't think I'm good enough to walk to that door, but I didn't say. I was like, I'm gonna walk. You open. It's right there, and I'm going straight through it. I didn't have any other door to go to, by the way. So this was really a good thing.
Well, guess what? I love that you just ended with that, because that's one of the things that I think about if an individual or a group or a company that's watching this episode would be curious. Well, how would I know that I'm ready? You just said something there, and I love that, which is I didn't have any other door to walk through. Not to mention the other person literally said, if I heard you correctly, don't worry, young man. You're going. So the trust was established, in my observation, early on, I mean, out of need and for both of you, but you were able to drop your guard and not make pretend that you had all the answers. And the fact of the matter is, a silo in essence was removed so that you could work together. And one of the things I think about is, by the way, folks, before we went live, Ivan and I were talking about a conference in Washington, D.C. that I have no military background. A friend of mine does, and I happened to be there. AUSA was the conference, and this was in 2025. And I bring it up because that sense of, I used to think very often I respect the military, but I felt like I had no business pursuing that because the military did this and business did that. And when you literally sit and listen, and I was listening to the speakers at one particular breakout room, the intangibles, the things that really matter, and trust is absolutely one of them, and authenticity and resilience are all critical skills that are needed across the board. But also, and this is where I want to come back to, which is the sense of business acumen, how that transfers from one specialty to another. I find it, and so I've become fascinated in the sense of, and that's why I'm bringing it up, is that I've become fascinated in the sense of what large companies can do in regard to utilizing military personnel, not to mention what military personnel can do to benefit their intangibles, large companies, in regards to handling huge projects. Ivan, I had one on your, when I was doing my homework, and as I said, I when I start these, I feel so not qualified until I read the data, and then I feel a little bit more confident that I can at least ask a question, which is talking about the fact that this is, my God, over 15 years ago, when your company was tied into what was the world's largest oil spill disaster. You just talked about oil and what have you. And I'm going to ask you, not how did it go, because that was documented, but I'm going to ask you, projects of that size and magnitude, how did you know that you were qualified? Here's a different door. So this is, in essence, to me, a different door. Projects that just seem so insurmountable. How did that go? How were you able to not be so intimidated, your company? You know what I mean, by the process. How did it go? What did you do?
Biggest challenge people have, John, is like,
Yeah.
they doubt in themselves, or even, well, we can't do it.
Mhm.
I think if you tell, we can do it, then you motivate, like, the group of, people, like, you motivate the team, to find a way how to solve, like, the biggest problems out there.
Mhm.
And what I knew, and at that point, that I have some like very, very smart people around me.
Ah. I like that.
And I always, like, people, and when we talk about, like, smart people, I think everybody is smart in its way, but it's how we motivated smart to come out, like, so they can actually be. And this actually goes, like, back to that, topic of trust, like,
Yes.
because, that's the motivation itself in people, and I'm known, like, to go there, like, hey, we can do this. And everybody's like, what did you just sign us up? It's like, I know that we have, like, so much brain power here, like, that we have so many people, like, they're, like, so smart. We'll figure it out. We'll get it done. And you touch one, like, very interesting topic here, like,
Yeah.
I'm really excited about, like, it's people that are trained in military.
Mhm.
Those are, like, the best people that you can have, because their rigor, the training that they have, to be, like, service members, it's the best, like, you can get, like, especially when you're trying to tackle something of a large magnitude
Right.
project, like you're talking about oil spill.
Mhm.
When you're trying to tackle something, these people, like, are trained to follow, to get, follow the rigor. And I think if you follow the rigor, if you're following the process,
Mhm.
we can get so many things accomplished. And so it was no doubt in my mind, like, that we can tackle projects of that magnitude,
Okay.
because we just need to follow the process.
Mhm.
And once, we in relationship, within, our team, like, and within the team of other groups, like, I always believe that, that the trust, going back to the topic of trust, when we
Right.
have the trust, we can accomplish anything. We can figure it out, like, how to, like, tackle the biggest problems in the world, including, like, or oil spill that you mentioned, that in one time had, like, a 420,000, like, task lines, to be done, like, in a project, 420,000.
Folks, think about the sense of the magnitude of that. And I bring it up to not dismiss other individuals or companies' problems. I don't mean it like that. And I don't mean to say, well, you can do it's more than that. But just think, if having the right brain power, having people that understand their assignment and are willing to do the assignment, when you have those things, you can scale that up or down. And that's the part that I'm finding increasingly uh, Fascinating. So let me ask you this. Let's go back to the element of trust. I mean, look, you've utilized trust not just in regards to your professional career and the longevity of that career, but also in regards to the book that you have pulled together, Trust 360. And so one of the things that I'm curious about is the ability, it's not just as we just touched on, understanding that people can do it and telling them they can do it. What would you say are some of the steps that could be scaled upward or downward in regard, younger or older, in regards to ways that you can encourage or have people trust the process, so to speak?
Well, I think there's several things that comes to my mind. When you're trying to encourage people, like to get beyond their comfort zone. Because we learn. So the one thing is, like, you tell people, like, in order to learn, to become more knowledgeable individual, to become a better team member, to become like a better person, you have to take a challenge to learn. So if I don't know it today, I'll make sense and know it tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
Or so I have like one of our, like, members of our team, like, who's been with us for 15 years.
Okay.
And I always take this example, because he once told me, like, I'll figure out anything in this world, just give me a little time. And I was like, well, I'll give you time, but you might have overnight, to figure it out.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, okay, then give me time, and I'll get it done. So the reason I'm telling this story, because the biggest things, to the people is like, give them the comfort that they can do it, and they have some time to learn.
Mm-hmm.
And whether just like when I was saying, an example, like if it's overnight, is the time, okay, come, we just talk about, we at the end of the workday, and said by 8 o'clock in the morning, we got to figure it out, so that's a little bit extreme. But a lot of times it's like, hey, we have a new challenge.
Mm-hmm.
We have, new issue that we have to resolve.
Mm-hmm.
Let's not get discouraged, because we can. Any individual, any human, can learn. That's why we were brought to this planet. Like, so it's always kind of like, if you don't know something, we can learn. There are books, there are trainings, there are, like, a lot of things out there, like, we can, so that's, I think that's, number one thing, like, I believe, and encourage them, that, anything that, it's out there, we can learn.
Ivan, let me touch on one thing that you just said, and I'm acknowledging more than asking a question, which I like, which is you said something really significant to me, which is the making under and helping someone understand the specifics in terms of from a business world. That individual said to you, if I heard you correctly, hey, if I get a little bit of time, I'll figure it out. And you say, which is way more realistic than not in these days, hey, we've got till tomorrow morning. And I feel like when you shorten the scope, so to speak, and say, hey, this is the timeline we're working, and then that individual says, okay, great, you gave me a little time. It's the expectations that you bring to light, which is really cool, because if you didn't say that, and that person just says, hey, give me a little bit of time, maybe it's 6 months is the time he was looking for, or she was looking for, and then it's too late. And in this day and age where things move so quickly, I really believe in, I used to fall prey to it, clear expectations or the lack thereof. So anyway, I acknowledge the fact that you were able to make it clear and linear at that point.
Precisely. Yeah.
Right.
You always have to come, like, with, whether I'm telling somebody that I will do something,
Mm-hmm.
or somebody is expecting, to do something,
Yep.
We have to have a deadlines.
Mm-hmm.
Because deadlines, I mean, we as humans, we perform the best if we have a deadlines. Because
what else can you do? That's
then we like, even though like there's a lot of people, these days, especially like, going back and talking young generation, they like to wait till the last minute to get things done. But I don't mind you waiting till last minute as long as you get it done, So it's, because then, in kind of what I'm touching in my book, that's about a trust is when you promise something, and this is like, and I just had like, talk about a book, and another thing, is that, all the like trust, is built, like by very small deposits in your bank account. And when I'm talking about small deposits in the bank account,
right?
If you're the leader, whether you're a leader of your organization, company, church group, whatever you may be, like, if you're that leader, if you're promising to get something done, make sure you get it done.
The accountability part. Exactly.
The accountability. If you're promising, if somebody gives you a document and you say, hey, I'm going to review it and get back to you tomorrow, make sure you get back to it tomorrow.
Exactly.
Don't make it like, don't make promises that you can't deliver. And you like, you asked me about the young generations before. Like,
exactly
one of the, and I had like, I was the young person one time, where I would like go to your boss, and something, you'd say, hey, well, like, because they tell you, oh, like, we need to get this done, and you're so excited, like,
I'll do anything.
Boss man, I'll have this done for you by Friday,
right?
Like, and then you go back and it's like, what did I just commit myself to? It? I have no idea how to do this.
Mm-hmm.
And, so, as a young person, where do you go from there? Now you're stuck in something that you have no idea how to do. Now you can learn, but this goes like, from, where I touch on a concept of reciprocal mentoring.
Okay.
You as a young person, you go to that, to that leader that you promise you're going to do something, and say, sir or ma'am, I committed to that, but I want to be honest with you. I need help, because I have never done this before.
Mm-hmm.
So what you do that early, because that's how you build trust on the other way. You go early and don't be afraid.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people like afraid you're not committed to something, and I'm cooked. No, you're not. Like, these leaders, they love to help people. I would say 99% of them, they love to help people. And you going back and asking those questions, now you're building a trust.
This is great. And I love it. I want to stay. Give me the term one more time. Reciprocal
mentoring.
Thank you. It's brilliant. And I'll tell you why. You know what? I had the oddest memory when you just said that, which is I had a former boss. In fact, I won't give you the oldest memory, which was me turning in homework in grade school. But let me move it a little bit further, closer to current, which is the sense that I had a former boss. She was brilliant. And her line that I never forgot was simply, I don't like bad surprises. And so when you just said people love to help, but they don't want to be let down. And I think in terms of establishing trust, as you just described, someone goes early on and said, hey, I need help here. Here's what I know. Here's what I've done. Here's what I don't know. And I've committed to have this done by X. I need help is a much stronger way to establish trust than I didn't do it. Well, I didn't do it because I didn't know how. But you said, and I think taking the confrontation out becomes a really big deal in regards to building and establishing trust. So I love that example.
Yeah, but I want to just add one more thing, before because what I meant by reciprocal mentor. So you, as the young person who committed to, like, you go to that experienced leader, who is now going to give you his experience to help you solve the problem that they committed.
Mm-hmm.
But what is reciprocal thing, and which is critical, like, these days in the new generations entering the workforce, is you as a leader, you need to be open to learn from these bright young individuals, who are so tech savvy, So once you share your experience, ask them, to share their experience. Now that you explain, what it really needs to be done, what kind of tools and things they're gonna use, and learn from it.
Yep.
And that's the critical in retaining young generations, in your workforce these days, because they expect, I think you and I talked a little earlier.
Yeah.
You pointed out, that I said something in this day and age. Young people, go and want to get a job or something. They're asking the employer, if I come work for you, what are you going to do here for me?
Exactly.
And that's the part, where we need to, as a leader, open up, to be mentored by those young people that come to you, because you can learn a lot. And that's, and this reciprocal mentoring concept, and again, is a two-way street, and a two-way street, when you have two-way street and communication, you're establishing a very, very high level of trust.
I think that's brilliant. I want to touch on something as well too, which is, as you talked about, you can really learn from younger people. I don't treat AI as strictly a young person's game. Obviously, it's every person's game, so to speak, if you want to advance. But to me, I would say, in terms of building and enhancing the trust dynamic, the ability to change timelines simply on not waiting for solutions, how would you encourage leaders? And we'll focus on either younger people or people that they're not accustomed to having as part of their team, to not only embrace AI, but to leverage AI in regards to getting the results that they need.
So first and foremost, AI should not change who you are as a person. So you have to show up authentic. AI is to speed up, how quickly you can get something done,
Right.
we're talking about a 10x, time to get something completed these days, because we have this beautiful technology that's evolving so fast, that's really making a human mind, so much faster and performing.
Right.
But what I touched about is big, in the book. If I am myself and people know me, how I behave over the years, how I lead, those AI should not change, who I am as a leader. It should just help me get things done faster, but it should not change my character. So, so going back to your question,
Yeah.
you have to maintain your authenticity, who you are as a leader, as a person utilizing these AI tools, because there is still a human part, in there, and human is still going to be involved. And as a leader, you're still conductor of the orchestra. And you show up, who you are as a person, so that's kind of like what's kind of most, the lesson learned, is from, and I think for every leader, yes, utilize these tools by all means, we are humanity, we develop them, they're here for us, but never forget, that those things should not change, your character and your authenticity.
I think it's such an encouraging way to go out. I'll ask you one last question, which you may have already answered. I've heard you, but simply a matter of this. Going forward right now, based upon whether what's going on globally, where there is so much distrust, where there is so much resistance, not to mention the speed of which things are being done. You just brought up the human factor. What would you say, whether it's an organization, whether it's military operations, whether it's corporate, of how they can, in essence, trust? There's a sports team in Philadelphia that used an expression, trust the process. I bring it up because their trust factor, we were asked to wait 10 years before they were able to do what they said they would do. What would you say if somebody asked you, I don't know where to begin? Nobody's doing what I need them to do. I'm in all kinds of deadline trouble, how would you suggest they begin a process in addition to contacting you?
Well, I think things that comes like to this, you have if you're in that with all of these big problems that we have, and if you're trying to establish yourself, you know you have to exhibit vulnerability as a leader. If you're trying to pull people together, you have to, like you said, that you have to establish yourself to be vulnerable human. You have to be very open. Hey team, hey people, I made a mistake that I'm trying to fix. And if you're vulnerable, now you're calling those to open up and to be to trust you. So I think if I would leave any leader, again, and when I take a leader, you can be leader at home, you can be leader in your company, you can be leader at your you can be leader in your soccer team that you're running. Whatever leader you are, show up, and be vulnerable. That's gonna buy you a lot.
That just made me so happy to hear. It gives me hope. Ivan, I'm going to have the links. Novaces, I will have your social media pages up as well too, to make it easy. Is there anywhere else you'd like me to direct new friends, new fans, new business colleagues to you?
I think you have it all the social media, to the webpage, and I'm happy, I'm very open, to people. I'm happy to share, in my personal email, so if anybody wants to reach out to me, I'm happy to have a discussion.
I think these discussions are really needed. Ivan Radovic, I'm very grateful that you showed up for me today and showed up for us. That sense of hope and vulnerability and authenticity really matters to me. Thanks so much for making time for us.
Thank you, John, for having me.
Absolutely a pleasure. And folks, you've just heard another episode of Your Message Received. Keep liking, watching, listening, sharing, and we will keep driving more content through your front door. John Duffin here with Duffin Media. Have a great day, all. Talk soon. Bye.
And now, making its way across the finish line, Your Message Received has been a production of Duffin Media.